Welcome, Facebook. Welcome, everybody. We are on day 3 of 40 days to home ownership. Thank you guys once again for joining me, and thank you also for the feedback we've been getting. 40 days to home ownership. So for the next 38, 37 days, for 40 days, you're going to have 40 days of content live on my page, Michaud Abraham, on Facebook. You can go back and you'll be able to watch the videos over again and review it. Day 1 and day 2 have been posted, so you can go and watch those videos to catch up what you may not have gotten so far. But the goal is to give hints, to give tips, to give secrets for the 40 days so that persons would know what they need to do on their part to home ownership, on their part to land ownership. So today is day 3. And yes, I did get a comment. I was writing backwards because, I'm using my phone. I don't have a camera as yet, but it's 40 days to home ownership. And what I want to talk about today, I will try to see how best I could write backwards so that the content would be readable somewhat. But due diligence, also known as anything else or what else. What it usually is, the person is ready to buy a property, they have the down payment, and then the question comes up, anything else? What else would I need? Well, you want to do your due diligence. And doing your due diligence, this is so important, but a lot of persons miss it. There are costs that I will break down in another video, but I just want to focus on the importance of doing your due diligence when entering a transaction with buying real estate. Now, there are 2 parts that I really want to talk about. Well, I'll mention 3. 3 that I want to touch on in terms of due diligence. Number 1, how does it look? Yes, attorney. You want to get a credible, knowledgeable real estate attorney. What does the attorney do? The attorney makes sure for you that the property that you are purchasing actually belongs to the person who is selling it, number 1, that person has rights to discard that property legally. The attorney would make sure that the property has what they call a good, clear, and marketable title. Now, I'm not an attorney. You would have to retain yourself a licensed real estate attorney, and you can get further information from them, giving the basics. What they do is make sure that the property that you would be buying is a buyable property. So it's very, very important that you get your attorney. What else do they do? Perhaps the person who's selling the property, they may be the owner of the property. Nothing wrong with that. What else would they do? Well, the attorney would also ensure that the person who's selling the property is able to sell it. I'm talking about if the person, for instance, has a judgment against them. They've been taken to court for whatever reason. Perhaps they've been sued. Maybe they've had, loans that were never paid and were taken to court. And the person or company who would have taken that seller of property to court would have gotten judgment against them. Therefore, they're not able to easily sell off what they have without meeting the obligation to the person who has judgment against them. The attorney is the one who is going to get all that information for you to make sure that when you buy the property, you would have a good, clear, marketable title on it, and that nobody can come to you and say, hey, look here, we have interest, we have stake in this property because we were owed or because we were co-owners or part owners of the property or whatever other reason there would be. So you would want to get yourself a licensed, credible attorney. Find out from maybe a company who it is that they use. Find out from family and friends who have clear title on their property, which attorney they use and what the process is like, so you would familiarize yourself with it. Because this is very, very important. Your due diligence in this is critical, because you could buy a property that you would never own. We have instances in the Bahamas where a person sold property to maybe upwards to 10 people or more if they could, So you have to be very careful. You have to be very wary, because not everyone is honest, and your attorney is going to be the one who is going to make sure that you have not fallen victim to any wicked person's scheme. So that's number one. Make sure that the attorney that you get is a licensed real estate attorney. They know what they're doing. They have a good reputation, and you could count on them for advice when purchasing the property. Also, ensure that your attorney registers your document. A good attorney is always going to make sure that that happens, so that your papers are not left outstanding. Now, what is that? Keep in mind that property is transferable by deed. The deed is the document that says that you are the person who owns the property. So you get a sales agreement from someone when you're buying, yes. But what you also want to get is the conveyance. The conveyance declares title, and the title is shown on the conveyance or the deed. So that document, that deed that you have, says that, hey, I own this lot so-and-so. So you don't have to be parked up on the property all the time, waiting for people to pass and say, hey, get off my property, this is mine. You don't have to be present. Your deed declares that you own it, and every deed is registered with the Department of Registry, or the Registry Department, or whatever we call it, right there on Shirley Street, that is in Nassau. The Registrar General Office have copies of all the deeds, and they know the dates and the books and everything of their recordings. That's the record, the recording of the deed. If your deed is not recorded, you essentially still do not own the property. The person whose property is recorded, they are the ones who own it. So make sure that when you purchase the property, you get yourself a good attorney who's going to make sure that the property has good, marketable, and clear title, who's going to make sure the seller of the property doesn't have any judgments against them, and who's going to make sure that your property documents are recorded so that you would legally be the owner of the property. Can't stress the point enough. This is due diligence that we're talking about. Number two. That's not a good two at all, but keep in mind, I'm writing backwards. So I'm trying to get this, that'll pass. Whatever, that'll pass. Number two, you also want to get this. And a lot of people don't also realize the importance of having one of these. I think it's for the Y. There we go. Land surveyor. Land surveyor. Please get your property surveyed. Again, the land surveyor would go out and they would confirm for you the boundaries of your property. You want to know, when you're buying a property, what the boundaries of the property are. Now, usually when you go to a bank, they would want to see a plot plan of the property. They would want to see where the property was surveyed, but you may not, if you walk the property, you may not see the stakes in place. You may not see the markers that tells you where the boundaries are on your property. When that is the case, you try to ensure that the seller of the property hopefully incurs that cost and gets the property surveyed so that the stakes are put in place so that you know the boundaries of your property, or you just absorb the cost and you save yourself in the future. Why is that? Because we have also in place departments such along with land and survey, we also have town planning. And town planning says you have a property 100 by 100. They probably, depending on where it is that you may be, also you have HOA subdivisions where they tell you that your home can only be so far or so close to the boundary line. You have to be 10 feet away from the eastern wall, 10 away from the western wall, 10 away from the north, 10 away from the south borders of your property. So, yes, you have all of this property here, but your home, your building can only be within certain parameters of that property, and you cannot build outside of that. So if you don't know where your markers are on your property, how are you going to be able to properly lay the foundation within the boundaries that you are legally allowed to build within? So you need to get the property surveyed by a licensed land surveyor, and I've watched a lot of people get in trouble because they did not do that. And you want to do it for other reasons. Perhaps it is, see, we have these things called encroachments. And encroachment costs a lot of property not to sell. What is an encroachment? You have a plot of land. This is your piece of the land. This land belongs to your neighbor. But your neighbor may be a crafty person and decides that they want to put a fence up to separate. So now they put a fence here. So these are the boundaries of the properties. But the neighbor says, hey, if I could get an extra 5 to 10 feet, why not they go ahead and they build this fence? And now you are not certain where your property starts or where it ends, and you lose 5 to 10 feet of valuable land space because you didn't have markers in place to say where your property line starts or stops. So now you are confined to a smaller space to build in, not realizing that square footage is wealth. Square footage increases value. In most cases, you have a bigger piece of land, it's more valuable. And you cannot do everything that you want to do, and you're wondering why your property is much smaller. That's because this person here decided that they want to hone in on your property and take away from you what you don't know you have. So you'd want to make sure that you go to a land surveyor and you get that done. I've seen cases where persons build their homes. They build a house, and the house actually straddles 2 properties. What do you do in a case like that? If your property is not surveyed, you lose. You're going to have to take this person to court if they are not willing to pay you for the extra square footage. And what if you wanted? You could sell them that portion so that it becomes theirs, so that you have yours. But what if you wanted all of that extra square foot? What if you needed that for the plan that you had for your home? Now you got to go ahead and get all of your plans changed. You paid for it. You have to get a new plan, a new property drawn up by the architect, who's going to charge you again because it's not their fault you allowed somebody to take up more space on your property than they should have. You have to configure the building differently, just so so it can fit on the property that you now have, which is less than you originally expected it to be, or than it originally was. So you have to go ahead and make sure that you request the services of a licensed land surveyor so that you can avoid this problem here with encroachment. You also don't want to be the one encroaching on somebody else's property, because it could be a very hefty charge, especially in Nassau, or especially, every part of the Bahamas, like we discussed in previous videos. You have wealthy places, and then you have places that are not so affluent. So you could imagine you bought a property for $100,000 and you started construction on the property to find out that you are the one encroaching on someone else's property because you did not get your boundaries properly set up by a land surveyor who's going to tell you this is where your land starts and stops. Now that person is going to say, look, yeah, you paid $100,000 for your property. I also paid $100,000 for mine. Why are you creeping in on my lot They charge you by the square foot. You could easily pay an additional $20,000, $30,000 for that. And they don't have to charge you exactly the value because they didn't ask you. They didn't negotiate a price with you for you to take over that property. They wanted their property just as well as you wanted yours. So make sure that you are within your right boundaries and not pay what you owe, but avoid the situation altogether. Find out what the quote is going to be. Some companies, they can charge you as little as $400. Others may charge a bit more, and depending on the property. I'm not a land surveyor either, so you would go to them and find out. But you definitely want to make sure you do that so that you could avoid those mistakes. Number 3, this will be the last one we touch on today. Definitely not. This is not last and least, but depending on the purchase. If you're not a person who is too aware, again, I'm writing backwards. How does it look? Not too bad. Appraisers. You'd want to enlist the services of a licensed appraiser. Now, definitely if you're going through a bank, there's no getting around this. They're going to want to know what the value of the property is. Now, the appraiser does a couple of things for you. The appraiser gives you a good idea of the value of your property. And they use the host of different methods to get that value. Depending on the type of property that you're buying, if it's an income-producing property, they'll probably look at the income calculation. How much would the property bring in terms of financial value on an annual basis, and they give you a cap rate to get a rounded figure of what the actual value of the property is. You have the most popular by far is the sales comparison approach. That's the approach that they take worldwide for residential properties. So you're talking about homes up to triplexes in the Bahamas, in the US and Canada. I think they go up to fourplexes, but anything up to a triplex is considered residential. And for residential properties, the best way to give the value is by sales comparison approach. Now, the appraiser, if you have a good appraiser, in the Bahamas, sales comparison is not always going to work for us because, you could have a mansion next to a shack. Just if the mansion sells for $1 million, and just because the shack is next door, you can't expect that also to sell for $1 million. But that's basically what the sales comparison approach is. You also have the cost approach, and this is oftentimes used for new builds or properties that is going to be built. If you ask what is going to be the cost of or the value of my home once it's completed, the appraiser is going to look at giving you a value based on what it's going to cost to build. We're looking now between, on the very low end, maybe $110 per square foot. On the higher end, up to maybe $180 or more per square foot to build. Depending on where you are, it's definitely going to go higher than that. But on average, the cost to build is straddling between $120,000 to $125,000. The average cost to build a home, $125, $125 per square foot. You can also confirm that with a licensed appraiser. You definitely want to get, if you're going to go through a financial institution, especially to buy the property, you definitely want to get enlist the services of a licensed property appraiser. Now, if, for instance, you're getting a property in a low-cost area, or you're getting a property from, directly from the government, and maybe you're going to make payments directly to them, and you find that the price is reasonable and all of the properties are selling for the same price and everyone is buying it and you want to get your piece, it may not be necessary because it's more or less like a cash sale. It may not be necessary to get the appraisal done. I may recommend that you do, but it may not be necessary in certain cases. Maybe your parents have a home and they want to hand it over to you and you intend never to sell it. You may not need an appraisal right away. If it's going to be gifted down to you, You may not need the appraisal, but depending on where you are, for tax purposes, property tax purposes, and for stamp duty, stamp tax purposes, they would want to know the value of the property, so you may need to get the appraisal done in that case. But in certain very off cases, you may not need an appraisal, but it's always good to get one done so that you would know the value of the property that you have. You would know the value of it in the event you would wish to sell it, or use it for investment purposes if you would want to go to a bank with it later on, just so that you could further grow your property portfolio. You can use your property that you have as collateral, so in that case you would want to get an appraisal done on it to know what the value is. You will also have an idea of what you can do to improve the value, and then you would also have a good idea, why appraisal is also important, so that you do not overspend on the property. If you know that it can only sell for so much, then you may want to limit whatever improvements that you do to the property, so that you do not overspend. Like they say, it's good to find the cheapest home in the nicest area, but you really don't want to be the giant and the biggest fish in a small pond. Basically, or the biggest frog in a small pond, whichever one hangs out in the pond. So, due diligence. These are your due diligence services that you do not want to neglect. Again, number one, enlisting the services of a licensed real estate attorney who's going to make sure that the property you buy has a good, clear, marketable title. Also make sure that the seller of the property has no judgments against them. Make sure that the property that you're buying has no liens or loans against it, so that when you buy it, you would be the rightful owner and nobody can come and hold claim on it. Number two, a licensed surveyor who's going to ensure that your boundary lines are in place so that no encroachment takes place, so that you would realize the full value of your property and nobody else comes and steals it from you, or that you don't intentionally or unintentionally take land from anybody else. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And number three, last but not least, enlisting the services of a licensed appraiser who's going to let you know what the value of your home or property is, how they came about the value, what you can do to improve it, or maybe reasons to not improve it. It may be in a ghetto, so you want to limit. You may not need granite countertops on a rental property in the ghetto. For Michaud works just fine. Some people use tile. I hate tiles in a kitchen countertop, but some people use it. So you'd want to know which expenses would make sense to spend in the particular area based on the value of it. So that is the 3. We're doing this thing, man. 40 days to home ownership. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for joining me. And I'll see you tomorrow with day 4. Please, if the video was helpful to you, please like, please comment, please share, and hashtag 40 days to home ownership. Thank you.